Next step is adding tasks into the database. So we're already adding tasks from this add task view into we're actually adding them through the application, which is good because then all the changes that we'll be making at this point are in the application class. So when we add a task, now we don't just put it into the array, we need to also put it into the database. So we'll be doing that next. So let's look at another SQL statement. This is the insert statement. An insert statement follows this form: insert into table name, and then you put a list of columns, and then you say values, which is a keyword, and then you put the list of values at the end after that. You could also use a where clause here. No, you can't use a where clause. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so this is pretty much it. This is what an insert statement looks like. So for instance, insert into tasks, name, complete, values, get milk, and false. We'll make a new row in the tasks table where the name will be get milk and the complete will be false, and the ID will once again be auto-incremented and automatically will be the next number in that auto-increment list, a number that's not already in the database table, and SQLite will take care of that for us. So we're going to be using an insert statement, and in the add tasks step, we're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing these steps. We're going to change add task. I think we already implemented add task on the application, but we're going to change it to insert into the database the task that gets passed in. So let's get to the application and have a look. So here is add task. We already have that implemented. This is what is called by the add task activity when we click, what is it, create? How did I say that? Add task. Click add task. When add task is clicked, we finish this activity, but in the background there we're calling add task, and this right now we just put the task into, and here I got this boilerplate I think that I got rid of in the first class. I don't think that's actually needed. So in any case, we're going to put this task into this array list. And we still want to do that because we don't want to, there's no need to go through the whole step of getting the data back out of the database when we already know what the data is. So we're still going to do what's on line 66, which is put the task into the task array. So then the application will continue to work as it did before. But before we do that, we're going to, I'm going to paste in some code here. We're going to put the data into the database. So here's the code that will do that. Now let's look at this. Let's go through that. I'm going to give us a little bit of formatting to put this in the middle of the screen. Okay, so here's the code that I just pasted in. So the first thing is we're going to create an instance of this class called content values. So let me import that so Android or Java knows what we're talking about, and that is android.content.content values. Content values is a way of referring to is an object that lets you refer to. It's sort of like a key value pair, but it's a little bit smarter underneath because it knows how to deal with. Android knows how to deal with it, especially in the case of the database, to getting the information back out of there and put into the insert query or pulled out of here inside of an insert query and put into the database. So it's kind of Android's special little thing there. But you can think of it just like a hash map, which is a key value pair type of a setup. So basically what we're doing is creating content values, and we're saying that the name is the task name, whichever name we're putting in, and the complete is the string value of the completeness of the task. And notice that we're using the same constants here, task name and task complete, to refer to the key portion of the content values, because that's going to be the column name. It's going to go straight into that column name in the database. So this is like getting the data together in a hash map that you want to put into the database, keyed by the columns that you want to put them into. Then the next thing you do, you know what, to make this even more explicit, let me break this out like this. I'm going to cut out that statement, which was just sort of a shorthand way of doing it, and make a local variable long ID equals database insert. Okay, so what's going on here is just focus on this portion for right now. Database.insert is going to create an insert statement and then execute that database, or execute that query against the database. And the first argument here is what table do you want to work on. The second argument, if I pop over the help again, hit F2 and make this big enough to see, zoom in here a little bit. The here's the fun Java doc for this method. First argument is the table, and the second one is this weird null column hack, which I don't completely understand, but here's the description. SQL doesn't allow inserting a completely empty row, so if initial values is empty, which is I think what comes from this content values here, this column will explicitly be assigned a null value. Okay, so that's the value coming out of content values. I don't know. This is some sort of weird thing that Java, or I mean that the Android SDK has to use if you want to make something null. You can put in a string here of let's see. I think this is the name of the column that you want to be null if the value in the content values is null. So it's maybe a list of columns. I don't know. Anyway, this isn't very clear, but basically for your purposes, I think just leaving this null should be fine as long as you provide some sort of initial value inside the content values. And the content values goes into the third position here. This map, which is the map of columns to values, and then this will be inserted as a row into the database. And then the other important part is that the return value of this is the ID that SQLite generated for that row. So that's what I'm doing here is I'm getting reference to that ID, and then the task now is going to have that ID, and that's important because that task object that's local, if we want to update that later in this same session, we need to refer to it by ID, so that task needs to know what its ID is. So that's what I'm setting the ID on the task after I do all that inserting into the database. So next step here is put the task into the current tasks, and then we're off to the races. We should have a task inserted into the database and shown in the array list of all the tasks that we have inside the application. So let me run this, and then our test is just going to be that it doesn't break for now. But that should be good enough to show that this is working. So add tasks. Let's say get milk. That's our standard hello world type get task. Add task, now it's in the database. What I could do, although I'm really scared to because of my problems with the emulator, is I could close the emulator now, although I won't, and then restart the emulator, and this task should still be there. So what I guess I could do, though, just to see if it's still there, is exit out here to the desktop and hit the menu, and then go here to Settings, and go Force Close the application. And then when it starts up again, then we'll know that wasn't in memory. That data wasn't in memory. It'll be loaded out of the database. So if I hit Applications, go to Manage Applications. Here we go. Task Manager. Click on that guy. Force Stop. That will kill the application. And hopefully give me some indication that it actually did it. Huh. No, it doesn't give me any indication. Alright, so thanks for nothing, Android. But I can come back here, and what is it? You hold down the home key, I think, and you can get a task picture. No, it looks like it's still running. Oh, no. Well, so, I don't know. It kind of took some time to start up there. I wonder... Does anybody else have an Android phone and they've done this and they kind of feel confident that we actually killed the application that time? Because I'm not.
No responses from our in Seattle audience.
Okay, let me try this one more time.
I've got kill it from the DDMS tab.
Kill it from the DDMS tab. That's thinking. There you go. Why are you even taking this class? You know more than I do.
That was
Okay,
Tim.
so here's DDMS. Thanks, Tim. DDMS, again, we've looked at this perspective before. This shows us the running emulator, or if we are connected to a device, it'll show us the environment running on that device. Here inside this the devices tab, we can see that this is a device that we're connected to. It's an emulator, and one of the processes running identified by the package name, which you remember I said is the unique identifier for a application, is a Com O'Reilly Android Task Manager. So that's the guy, that is our application. And what I can do here is click stop, and now it's definitely gone. So if I come back to the emulator, Task Manager, I don't know, it doesn't say anything interesting about that. But if I hold down the home key, it still shows up in here. I don't know what that means. So I guess that this is a list of recently run applications or something. I don't know. That's kind of confusing. But anyway, if I click it now, it looks like it's kind of starting up. So it wasn't running before, and now here it is back again. Well, here, let me try it one more time, and we'll check this process ID, 359. So if I kill that, it's gone.
The home button is apparently recently run apps, not running apps.
Ah, okay. Useful to know. I thought it was like a running apps. So when I hold down the home button, go to recently run apps. That's interesting that it's in a different position here. Maybe that's just I've used it more. Now when I click Task Manager, it'll start up, and it's not 359 anymore for the process ID. It's 368. So we know it's a different running instance, and getMelk is there. So we know that the task list didn't come out of memory. It came out of the database. So we were successful. Good, and thanks for everybody's help on the Android phone stuff. I don't actually have an Android phone. Is that surprising?
Yes, it is.
Huh.
I have a phone from a different Californian company.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We think that your work should buy you an Android phone. Since
Oh, we have them laying around, but I just haven't used it in my daily life enough to have run into or to know that about that. So that's good to know. I'm learning. Everybody's learning today. That's why we have this. So I can learn from you, and you can learn from me.
Someone in the chat room says, boo.
How the data is persisted across restarts of the emulator. There are a couple of questions regarding that while you were.
Okay, well, it's written into the database file. So the database file is a file stored on the file system, and that's however SQLite chooses to store its data. It's inside of a file, so that file is there between runs of the application. And then when you start up that SQLite Open Helper, remember we pass in the file name as one of the arguments. So let me switch back to Java. SQLite Open Helper. In the constructor, one of the arguments to super is the name of the database, and we pass tasks_db.sqlite, and that will be created into a file on the file system, and that will persist between runs of the application.
cool. So we actually had a couple questions about that file name. Since you've got it highlighted, I thought I would ask now. Does it have to be? Does it have to have .SQLite at the end, or can you put anything there? Or
It doesn't have to have SQLite at the end. In fact, I think the convention is, since I think the version is SQLite 3, the convention is usually SQLite 3, but it really doesn't matter. It's just a file. File names are not as important as Windows made them out to be on other applications or on other operating systems.
okay. And we have a bunch of people asking if you have multiple apps. Say you had two task managers, maybe called Task Manager 1 and Task Manager 2. If you used the same name for the database, would they be sharing a database? Do they get a separate one? And can apps share databases?
So I already addressed the can apps share database question a little bit, but just quickly, no. I don't think that you can share the file what would be better to do is a content provider. So if you look into a content provider on the docs, that's probably what you want to do instead, and then have one of your apps act as a content provider. But the question about whether or not you can have two task manager applications is no, you can't. And that's because every application, I'm opening up the manifest now, Android manifest, every application that you install has to have, once I switch over to the XML here, well here, I'll just stay in this in this view. Every application has to have a unique package name. So you can't install another application with the same package name, and every unique application has its own sandbox area of the file system that other applications can't access unless you go through some sort of sharing process, I think. But that's not the right way to do what you want to do if you want to share data between applications. The right way would be to do a content provider.
Got it. Okay.
We have some comments that different apps can access each other's files if they are signed by the same developer key.
Okay, so that's the way. I was going to look into this afterwards, but if we want to talk about this more on the forums, we can. But yeah, so there is a way to share the same file system, I guess. But again, you don't want to share the same database file because, especially if you're going to be doing some work on the database in the background in one of those apps, you could run into concurrency issues there, which means like I'm inserting something into the database at the same time another app is, and maybe it's the same data. And it shouldn't be done that way. There should be one gatekeeper to the data that goes into there because you're not sure what the other application is doing. So yeah, like say I get a list of stuff out of the database. Here's a good example. I get a list of tasks out of the database, and then another application accesses the same database and deletes some of those tasks out from under me. And then when I go to interact with them in this other application that got the list in the first place, then they're not there, and that's kind of a surprise. So concurrency issues like that. Content provider is the way to fix that kind of stuff.
Okay. And can you jump back to the code? We have some people who are asking about exception handling, and they're wondering if we should be adding exception handling or if there are ways that it's being sort of handled internally. So, if, for instance, if the query returns something that is unexpected.
Well, you are in control of the data that's going into the database, so hopefully nothing gets in there that's unexpected. I'd rather use some sort of a defensive coding type of a setup there to make sure that only the data that you want is getting into the database. But I mean, this is, if values that you didn't expect are coming out here, then you would probably get a runtime error. Like if you switched up, let's see, like for instance, when you're loading the tasks out of the database, if you switched up the column names and figured that you're getting ID when instead you're getting name, then you would have a casting error or a type error in Java, and you'd get a runtime error, and then the app would blow up. So I guess you can. I'm not sure what if any exceptions that the database query stuff throws, but they seem to all be runtimes. Otherwise, Eclipse would make me, or it wouldn't compile. I would have to, catch a couple exceptions.
Okay, and we have a question from the audience.
Wondering if it's possible to control where the SQLite database is stored, if you have to store it on the phone's ROM, or if it can be stored on the SD card.
I don't know. That's a good question, but my guess is that so you don't have to use the SQLite Open Helper for one, because when you do, it pretty much takes care of the storage. All you get to do is pass in a name, and I guess well, let's look at the help. I don't know if that can be a path. Here, I'm going to pop open the Java docs here. I don't know if that can be a path to something when you say the name. I'm going to see if it says anything about that here. So, name of the database file or null for an in-memory database. So it doesn't say anything about being able to pass a path for the name. But, again, there's nothing that says you have to use a SQLite Open Helper. You can go and use the SQLite database. I'm switching over to the application here. SQLite database is what you get out of the helper. It just manages the versions for you. So you could create a SQLite database instance that pointed at whatever location you wanted. So yes, you could store it on another SD card or something. All you need to do is get a reference, or you probably just need to pass a file handle to this guy.
Okay, we have another question from the audience. He's grabbing the mic.
Of course, accessing this SD card requires something in the manifest to tell the phone that it's going to be doing that. So
yeah, that's a good point.
If people want to share files between apps by all writing them on the card somewhere that they all know about, they'd have to get permission from the user to do that in all apps cases, which might be a little bit quirky. So
that's a good point. So, I mean, if you want to ship, maybe you want to ship a database file that an application could use, or something like that. Like, it's just a file on the file system, so wherever the file is, you can get access to it after the fact. So hopefully that answers that question.
And then I just have one more question that was related to the code in this segment before we go on. If you can you scroll down a little bit? It was related to the ID that is being returned, and they were asking if it's the row ID or the primary key ID, or if it's the same thing.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a row ID. It's the ID column. You know what? Let me, because I never defined what that was. I guess it is just the primary key. The one that I defined as the primary key. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I had to think that through really quickly. But since I defined in the Open Helper that the ID column is the primary key, that's the one that SQLite returns from any insert statement, so that that can be managed right away without doing another query, which would be weird to try to figure out. If I had the same name in there, because I allow the same names, and I didn't say that there's a restriction there, I'd have to figure out which was the last one that was inserted with that name, and then figure out what the ID was. So SQLite, as a convenience, whereas not all databases do this, it will return the ID from an insert statement, so that you can, or the primary key from every insert statement, so that you can work with that object with this unique identifier as you're expected to do right away.